Hey guys, it's Oddly Cute. I'm going to be showing you guys today how to paint with ink and watercolor. So on the left side I'll be using ink and on the right side I'll be using watercolor, and then in the middle I'll be combining the two together to show you the differences and how well they work together. So first I'm going to be using a dark brown ink. It's a much richer color, and then I'll be using a sepia color watercolor. I'll only be using the one color, so I'm going to be diluting the ink first to get the first layer going on. I like to wet the whole face first, that way it can flow the way I want to and let it go. The only problem with ink is that it does dry pretty quickly, so you gotta work kind of fast. And for the watercolor, I'm just going to do the same thing as I did with the ink, except it's watercolor. So treat it as watercolor, so use a good amount of color, and I'm just going to spread it all around the face. The only problem with this now, you're switching back and forth, is that watercolor tends to dry slower than ink does, so I'm going to be doing more layers. So because it's going to take longer for the watercolor to dry, I'm going to be working on back and forth the ink. I'm just going to start doing the tones. I'm still using the same color, I'm just using less dilution on it, so the more I layer, the more richer the color is going to be. For the darker tones, I'm just using the pure as I can of the ink to get a more richer, darker feeling going on. And the darker parts are going to be where the eye is and cheeks, and under the chin would be. For the watercolor, I started painting too early. It was still wet, so I'm having a little more difficulty with it. But you just continue layering. The whole point of watercolor is just continue layering until you are happy with the effects you're getting. It's going to be the same process. It's the same face, except it's on the different side. So I'm going to be doing the same shadowing and the same process. And I'm just going to be going back and forth, letting each part dry every time. I don't want to continue painting over everything too wet, then it's just going to flow too much and be out of whack, and you know. Alright, I'm going to start with the middle face now. So like the first face, I'm going to be using ink for the tone. I'm going to use a little darker tone because I want it to stand out more. I'm also going to be using a tissue to bring out some of the highlights. That way it will have more of a three-dimensional effect going on. With a wet brush, I'm just going to soften the edges. I don't want too much of harshness. Then with the brown watercolor, I'm going to be using it as a darker tone for the shadow. Something to remember when you're doing a shadow, it's always darkest when it's closer to an object, like from the bangs, the eyes, the nose. It's going to be a much darker tone, and then it's going to fade out a little lighter as it goes further away. So I really like using the ink and watercolor together. They both work very well. I think it's because they're both like water soluble kind of media. So the thing to remember about using ink is that because it does dry faster and it is ink, it's more permanent than watercolor. So when you put it down, once it dries, you can bring it back up like you can in watercolor. So when you put it down, it is there. So you want to make sure you know what you want to put down, and if you want to bring it up, you want to make sure it's wet enough that you could take it up with a tissue or with a brush. So I am using a cold press paper, watercolor paper right now. I'm not a big fan of cold press because it's too bumpy for me and I feel like I have a harder time with it, but it is good for quick things like this, and just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it's not gonna work for you. So I do recommend, if you're not sure what paper to use, just to try any kind of paper you find. Doesn't matter what kind it is, doesn't matter if it's good quality, bad quality. If you try it and if it works for you, then go for it. It's the same with watercolor. Since there's so many brands too, I usually use Winsor Newton. It's a brand that everybody that I know uses it. So it's the one that I'm more comfortable with or more knowledgeable about. But I know that there are so many kinds that it's hard to know what you really want. It's just like anything else. You just gotta try it and see what happens. Same with this. Using two different kinds of medias like ink and watercolor and mixing them together, you'll never know what you'll get. And I really like the effect of using both media, especially on one face, because I feel like it has a different texture going on and each one has its own effect. Like for the ink, it's more of a glowy, more luminescent feeling than the watercolor does. Alright, well that about wraps it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful or enjoyable to watch or hear me talk. Until next time, please like and subscribe. If you want to leave a comment for any suggestions, please leave so. If not, then don't do anything. Anyways, see you next time. Bye.